This video is a replay of a trade I took today. Now, it probably goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. I am not a financial advisor, and trading entails risk. Just because I got these results today doesn't mean that I can get these every day, nor that you can. Remember, the entire premise of the investing project and the $1 million experiment is that I am not an expert, and yet I am learning how to do this. So for heaven's sake, don't just blindly copy me. Instead, find a mentor, someone who is an expert, and join their community. Pay for their mentorship. This approach has worked very well for me, and it likely will for you too. So use this video partly as education and partly as inspiration. After all, if I can learn this, you can too. Okay, so interesting day today. A couple of good trades. The first thing is to understand the context. So coming into today, last night after hours, Micron reported earnings, and as a result of this, it was a substantial earnings beat, and the NQ in particular gapped way up in the pre-market hours. And so we opened up very high and very close to the top of its average true range. Ditto for the ES, although the NQ was more stretched. And so we ended up with this substantial pullback in shortly after the market opened. So we had quite a big sell-off on the NQ and on the ES. And what we have right now is a situation where the NQ is approaching its previous day's low, but the ES is already below, and it's bouncing off a level below the previous day's low. So the location is good for a rebound, especially considering that this is probably overdone. So I was looking for a spot to get in, and what I noticed here, because it was already so stretched, normally, I'm going to hit play for a second here and just let the next candle start to develop. Normally, I like to wait for a green candle, and then I'll take when the next green candle goes above the previous green candle, that's when I get in. But in this instance, because it was so stretched and in such a good location, I decided I didn't want to wait. So I put in my buy order at 74.08. And I did that because I could get in for just about 15 handles of risk. I ended up expanding that slightly to, I think, 18. But it allowed me in for a reasonably good amount of risk. The NQ, I would have had to take a lot more. You can see each of these gradations here is 15 handles on the ES, and each one is 50 handles on the NQ. And what I see here is, if I were to try getting in above this candle here, I would need 350s. I need 150 roughly NQ points to get in. That's $300 of risk for one NQ contract. Whereas for here, I could get in for 15 or so. That's about $300 of risk for 4 ES contracts. This is a much tighter setup. I liked this better. So this is what I ended up going with. Now, what ended up happening here is that, sure enough, it rebounded rather heavily. And once I got into this, I'm going to pause it as soon as it triggers. Now, this ends up moving very quickly. I don't want to lose this because in real time it was happening very quickly. The first thing I adjusted my stop downward by, I think I added 3 handles to get a little bit of extra room here. But the very first thing I did, because it was moving so quickly, is I started moving this target up. And this one I moved up to the initially to the VWAP here, while I started moving this one a little. And you'll see in a second, as it starts taking off, actually I didn't move those until it had already gone 15 handles, so it will in a second here. Let's give it a moment. As soon as it goes 15 handles, it pulls the stops up to even. And this is where I started moving this up because it was rebounding very quickly. And I ended up putting this in, I put the very first take profit at 74.48, which is 40 ES handles in. And I put this other one further up. Now, this other one, the second one, didn't actually trigger, so it's kind of irrelevant. But I want to show how this worked. So I was trailing this first set of 2 contracts, 15 points behind the high. And so it just continued to make its way upwards. And I like the idea. It was moving so quickly. I like the idea that this one was just short of the VWAP because I figured there's opportunity there. So what I was doing here is, when you can see on the 5-minute, let's just let this one close. What I ended up doing is trailing, not only this one trailed automatically, the first 2 trailed automatically, but I ended up moving this one up as well. And shortly, I think I ended up putting it right just below 74.28. I ended up putting it at 20 points up, so 74.28, just below the other one, and this continues to trail up. Now I have at this point triggered the second level. Now what I'm doing, or sorry, the first target, and what I'm at 40 points, which is a pretty substantial gain. That's I don't want to do the math in my head, but then I followed this up to the bottom of this 5-minute candle because I didn't want to give more than that back. And it turns out that's where I ended up getting stopped out here. So it didn't get much further up than this before running into a bit of resistance, and it took me out. Now, of course, it turns out I was only counting on this getting. Okay, so I'm out of this trade now. I was out of this trade with $760 gain. So that's a pretty substantial. What was that? That was 76 times 2, so 152 handles, ES handles of profit because I had the 4 contracts on there. So that was a really good trade. But I was only counting on it retracing about 50% of this move. And this is about a little bit more than 50% of that move. So at this point, I'm happy with it. Now, I didn't know that it was going to actually continue going up, and I could have made quite a bit more if I'd stayed in. But, you know, that's knowledge that's only available in hindsight. I didn't know that at the time. This was, in my estimation, pretty much a perfect trade. In fact, if I'd left it just to the brackets as they were set up, I would have triggered 2 at 20 and 2 at 40. Instead, I got 2 at 40 and 2 at 36. So I did substantially better on this trade than the so-called perfect trade would have been with my bracket on the ES. So I'm very happy with this trade. Now it's 7:13 a.m. I'm going to fast forward this to 7:45, and I'm going to talk about trade number 2, because this recovered. You could see what was going on here. Meanwhile, on the YM, this had really taken off. As much as this had recovered, YM was that much more energetic in its response. So you'll see in a second. Okay, so it looks like we've reloaded okay here. So now I'm going to look at this YM, and we can see that the YM has just taken off, and it went way, way, way up. It's now past its average true range high, which gives me a lot more confidence that it's stretched its rubber band about as far as it reasonably is going to stretch in any given day. Now, it doesn't mean it couldn't go higher, but at this point, I'm starting to look for a pull, and I'm seeing this is right now. This is 7:42. Almost 7:43. There's about 2.25 minutes left in this bar. I can already see a pretty substantial pull on the 15-minute. You can see it pulling back. You can see on the 5-minute. I'm actually going to get in on this on the 15-minute, and so I don't want to lose this because this moves fast. So I'm actually going to put my trade in right at the level where I did get in, so I don't lose this. And it was 52,948. So that's 947, 940. Come on now. It was 948. Let me get that. I want to be precise. Let's get it. Okay, good. So, I didn't actually put the trade in until after the 15-minute bar had closed, but I don't want to miss it on the replay. So you can see that this is where my level was, and it's right below the 15-minute bar, and it pulled back just slightly, and so okay, there we are. Now I'm in. Now what I did here is I reduced my size. Normally I'm trading 6 YM contracts, but I could see when I was looking at this that if I were going to put the stop above the 15-minute here, I was going to need to buy an extra, I don't know, 40 points or so of room. And so instead of 6 contracts, I reduced it to 4 contracts and added 39, I think it was 39, something like that, more points, more ticks of room in order to accommodate that. So I kept my risk level static. So now I'm going to go ahead and set this to maximum and let it go. Now what's interesting here is I've been taking my own advice, which is put the trade on, put the stop in the right spot, put the targets in a good spot, leave the room. And so for the last couple of days, I've been doing this. I actually put the trade on and I packed up my stuff and I went to Home Depot and I bought a shop vac. So true story. It's exactly what I did. And while I was out at Home Depot, it went ahead and did its thing. And so I actually appreciate this approach because I didn't even see this. I was not sitting there watching it. If I'd been sitting there watching it, my mind would be looking for ways to talk myself out of this trade. And you know what? I'm glad I didn't see that, because it was in the right spot. All the reasons for taking the trade were there. It was the location was legit, the setup was legit, the risk level was legit, the position size vis-a-vis the risk level, all of that was good. And there's no reason to believe that this needed to be tinkered with. And so I left it alone and left the house. And so, you know what? Fair enough. And so this is actually how that played out. Because by the time I got home with my new shiny shop vac, this had already gone through both the targets, and I was out with a clean $500. Now, if this had been 6 contracts, it would have been $750, but the risk would have been too high, so that was not legitimate. So the 4 contracts allowed me to do this with the correct amount of risk, and the result was, as I just described, a so-called perfect trade with respect to the ATR, the bracket that I have set up at the ATR, the automatic bracket that I've got running. So as I've said before, this on the YM, it pulls both contracts to even after it moves 100 points in the right direction, and then it trails the first 2 or the first 3, the first half. It trails right behind the low. And in this case, it took the first target at 200 points. And ultimately, it's going to. Now, if I had been sitting here, I probably would have been trailing manually to the bottom of the 5-minute bars. However, since I wasn't here, it just did its thing, and I came back to a full 2-target win. So that's kind of a nice day. It was a $1,200 and some day. So happy to see that.